Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys have had a first 2 days of basketball. I waited till the end of the slate today to make the video so I could show you guys my results from the first. From yesterday, you guys know I did well on the first day, so I'll show you my results from today and the day prior. But if you don't know who I am, my name is Shook. I make videos for NBA, I make videos for NFL. All these videos, they get posted on this subreddit right here. It's called DF Sports. My username is Shook. And I make updates with all the news that comes out throughout the day. You can ask me questions about the slate, stuff like that. So that will be down below. And then if you ever need to get a hold of me privately, you can get a hold of me on Twitter. Right here are my handles. So let's get into my lineups, but before we do that, if you are interested in joining my Discord, that will also be linked either in the comments or that Reddit post where I've, private videos going over the slate, player pools for cash, GPPs, um, showdown stuff, showdown cores, night slate cores, just a whole bunch of stuff that'll be in the Reddit post as well. So let's go over my lineups from the past 2 days for NBA. So, I guess I had all my lineups in this one, so we'll do that. We'll do Showdown, and then we'll do yesterday. So for Showdown, I think I won a little bit of money. As you can see, I just jammed Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James in pretty much every lineup. That was the core for me today for Showdown was Durant, AD, LeBron James. That was my core. They all nuked. So won a little bit of money on Showdown. For the main slate, I did lose. Just Brook Lopez, man. I completely underowned. People think just because he's going up against Embiid, it's a bad matchup, but that's just the furthest thing from the case at all. Um, bigs that can get out to the 3 point line, Embiid has trouble with. So don't regret it, but sucks. But yeah, and then Eric Gordon. I mean, what was that? Luckily, I went 5-1 on Prize Picks. He covered his points, but what was that? And he barely played in the first half. I just don't understand. But my core today was Jordan Goodwin. He nuked. Expected. Kevin Durant was a core play for me. He nuked. Grayson Allen was a core play for me. He did good. And Eric Gordon was a core play for me. He did fine. And then my other lineup was I jammed Giannis, Embiid, and Kevin Durant. And, Giannis and Embiid subpar games definitely did me in there. So main slate was an L. Showdown was alright. And then yesterday was a really, really good day. I went Matthias Bain. I didn't like THT, but he just fit. I didn't have the money to get to Sochan, but I really liked my lineup, so I just stuck with it. Maybe I could have went Zach Collins and then up to Sochan. That probably would have been better. And then Evan Mobley was a dud. Vooch blowout. He would have nuked if he got the double double. Not the blowout too. Obi Toppin blowout. Tyus Jones blowout. THT benched. Luca carried me. The core that I had for this slate was Desmond Bain, Tyus Jones, Obi Toppin, and Evan Mobley. So, really good core there outside of Evan Mobley. All right, let's get into this 12 game slate. So I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible as I can. So I'm not going to go into like all the bench rotations and stuff like that. I'll just mention if I have some interest in a bench guy and who that is. I'm not going to say who's in the rotation in the bench and stuff like that. I'll just mention if I do have interest in a bench guy. So Denver versus Memphis. You have Nikola Jokic here at the top as the highest priced player on the slate. I mean, it's completely deserved, right? I don't know. They always take forever to get the game logs up, but no Steven Adams on the other side of this going up against Xavier Tillman. I mean, I'm always fine with Jokic. Like Jokic, Luka, Giannis, no matter the matchup they're in, I'm always okay with it. It's just up to you if you feel the value is good enough to get up to him. Once again, we have some pretty good mid-range plays in this slate, so I like Jokic. It's up to you if you think you have enough salary to go there. But yeah, Jokic is always going to be a great play. You have Jamal Murray at 7-7, who I think probably is going to go super, super low owned on this slate. You have other guards in a similar price point in much better spots and cheaper prices. Like you have Tyler Hero still cheap. You have Fred Van Fleet in a really good spot. Who else? You have Drew Holiday that played like 50 minutes. That's still cheap. You have Scotty Barnes, even though he's not a point guard, that's still cheap. You have the Chicago guys, right? So I think a lot of people are going to go to those. You have De'Aaron Fox. So I think a lot of the people are going to go to like guys like that over Jamal Murray. So I'm definitely intrigued by Jamal Murray at 7.7K for tournaments. I think he's still too cheap. Guy that can stuff the stat sheet, do a bit of everything. So I do like Murray, and I think he'll be pretty low owned. On a 12 game slate, it's really, really hard for me personally, to go to guys like Aaron Gordon, MPJ. There's no way I'm playing KCP on this big of a slate. Just no way, no, zero chance. So mainly the interest for me on Denver is going to be Jokic and Murray. And like, if you want to play like an MPJ or an Aaron Gordon in like large field tournaments or like a last man in, I mean, be my guest. But I'm not going to go there. Memphis. So I still think Bane's a little bit too cheap, right? With no John Morant, his usage goes way, way up. I believe he's like 1.3-ish fantasy point per minute. I could be wrong. I haven't looked at NBA Wowie this season, but he's going to lead the way offensively. At 8.6K, I still think he's a little bit too cheap, so I do like me some Bane. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to go a bit under-owned after what happened last game. Got into a bit of foul trouble early and then had just a really, really bad game. Same thing we'll talk about Evan Mobley, who I think is a phenomenal play once again. So I like Jaren Jackson Jr. here as a bounce-back candidate. I think Marcus Smart is just pretty safe at 5.8K. I don't think he has like an insane ceiling at this price point, but I think he's very, very safe. I think he played some pretty big minutes if I recall correctly, and he's gonna have the ball in his hands a decent amount too. So I think Smart's just super, super safe. And then Xavier Tillman had a huge game at 5.8K going up against Jokic. I think he is a fair play. If it was a different spot, I would like him quite a bit. But I think going up against Jokic, I think it's just fine for me. And then you have Luke Kennard out. You saw Zaire start. I think he played low 20s minutes. He's a playable value. And then with Luke Kennard out, you're probably going to see more minutes for guys like, Roddy, Zaire. I think Roddy's interesting, but just for large field tournaments. So that's going to wrap it up for Memphis. Let's move on to Detroit. So this game looked pretty appealing to me. So two terrible teams, two fast-paced teams. So I like Cade Cunningham quite a bit. He had a huge first game. I wish they had the game logs up, man. I really, really do. And I believe they also played pretty decent minutes as well. Yeah, you saw Cade play 36. You saw Duran play 32. You saw Stewart play 35. So I think Cade's a pretty good play, even at 9K. So I do like Cade. I think he'll be pretty low owned as well. It's a really good spot for Duran. I mean, last season was extremely frustrating for the Detroit Pistons bigs. They would keep rotating what they were doing, but if they're going to play Jalen Duran 30 plus minutes, I think he's a really good play at 5'6". Like that a ton. Thompson, I'm just okay with, and if they're going to play Stewart 35 minutes, you definitely have to have some interest in him, with like him a decent amount. Plus the pace-up spot, Killian Hayes started. I think he's okay at 4.9, and then it's impossible for me to just go to anyone else. I was surprised by the starters' minutes. I really, really was. Burks and Ivy, they got some run, but don't think it's necessary to go to these guys on this slate. Let's move on to Charlotte. So I like LaMelo's ceiling. I think he's priced about right, but I still do like his ceiling quite a bit. Once again, like I said, this game is going to be super, super fast. So like LaMelo. I think Terry Rozier is interesting if you don't want to get to LaMelo. Terry has a lower floor than LaMelo, but he still does have a ceiling. And if you want to get a part of this game with a cheaper price point, I think that's okay. So I think Rozier is okay to interesting. I do like him. PJ kind of tough to get to at that price point, but I like Mark Williams too. I like both the centers in this game quite a bit. I was really kicking myself for not getting to Mark Williams last slate because I liked him at low ownership quite a bit. But Last season, him and Richards would kind of split the center minutes, and I believe he got, I want to say decent. Yeah, he played 30 minutes. So if he's going to get close to 30 minutes, he is still too cheap at 5.8K. So I do like Mark Williams. I think he's a pretty solid play at 5.8. Definitely still too cheap. And then I'm not going to go to anyone off of the bench there for Charlotte. So with Miami, I think Butler's just okay. I think Bam's fine. It's a really, really tough spot. But I do like Tyler Hero still quite a bit, even up against Boston. He shot the ball like 22, 23 times, if I recall correctly. He just had a terrible shooting game. Harris too cheap, like him quite a bit. Not going to play dusty Kyle Lowry. And there is a guy that I do like here quite a bit for value, and that's Kevin Love. He played, I believe I want to say 28 minutes. We know he's a good point per minute guy. Who did Miami play last game? Played the Pistons. Okay. So if we're going to continue to get 28 minutes of Kevin Love, I think that stands out to me. So I do like some Kevin Love for value. And then I'm not going to go to anyone else. So the real standouts for me with Miami, Tyler Hero and Kevin Love. Yeah. On to Boston. So the good thing with Boston, they ran their starters into the ground last game. And I know this game environment isn't the best, but if we're going to get like 38, 39 minutes from starters this early into the NBA season, you definitely have to have interest in them. I think Porzingis looks good. I think Brown's playable. I think Drew Holiday's a fine play at 6'5". Derek White's okay. And then with how tight of a rotation they ran, it's really, really hard for me to get to anyone else. But I do like the main five Boston guys, even though it's a tough spot, even though this game environment is pretty bad. But if they're going to get 40-ish minutes, you definitely have to have some interest in Tatum, Porzingis, Brown, Holiday. I think point per dollar, my favorites are Porzingis and Drew Holiday, but I think Tatum is interesting as a spend up as well, with the amount of minutes they did play. On to the Knicks. So I think Randall is he's just there for me. He's always fine. I think I prefer the discount to Brunson, a guy that's going to stuff the stat sheet as well. I think he's a bit too cheap. So I think Brunson's a good play. RJ just there for me. I'm not going to pay 5.5K for quickly, even though he did have a pretty good game. Mitchell Robinson always intrigues me just because he does have a high ceiling, but the guy is always in foul trouble. But if you get a game where he goes for like a double-double with like 3 blocks, he can break the slate at that price point, and he's always low owned. So for that reason, I always have interest in Mitch for large field tournaments. Definitely tough to get there in single entry, but I do have interest in him for large field tournaments. And then Quentin Grimes will start. He'll play, I don't know, mid to high 20s minutes. Don't think it's necessary on a 12-game slate, but he is playable. And then Hartenstein, if Robinson gets into like some sort of foul trouble or anything, he will gain minutes from it. Hartenstein's a good point per minute guy. I just, once again, kind of like a large field tournament play on this big of a slate for me. So yucky spot here for the Hawks. Pretty unappealing team to me. I think Trey's just a contrarian play to me. I think Murray's a contrarian play. Don't love Capella. I think Bay's priced right. I think my favorite play here is going to be Jalen Johnson, who had a really, really big game off of the bench. I think they should just start him, but I don't know what they're doing. Jalen Johnson's a really good point per minute guy. It's just up to if he gets the minutes or not, which he did last game. I do have a feeling he is going to go a bit over owned after last game, though, and now he's 4.7K, so it's we'll see what the ownership comes in on him, but I still do have interest there. If you guys listened to me last in my video last game, I told you guys I like Jalen Johnson as price point regardless if he started or came off the bench. He absolutely nuked at no ownership. No one played him. So hopefully some of you guys did get to Jalen Johnson that day. I think it was a smaller slate too. And then Hunter started. He played around 30 minutes. I think he's a fine value. Seems pretty safe to me at 4 or 5. I don't mind that at all. Let's move on to the Thunder. So SGA is just phenomenal. I mean, this kid's just absolutely phenomenal. If you want to play SGA, I'm not going to talk you off it. Now, it's not a good spot against Cleveland. Cleveland plays very, very slow as well. Good defensively, but I'm not going to talk you off SGA ever. Giddy, I think, is overpriced. Chet Holmgren, I believe, got into foul trouble and didn't play too many minutes. I think he's a fair play. I think my favorite play on OKC is going to be Jalen Williams. He's good. He's been much, much more aggressive. He had a really, really good preseason too. I think he's a pretty solid play. So I like me some Jalen Williams at 5.9K. Dort, no thank you, and then they're going to round out the rotation with guys like Joe, Wallace, Dieng, etc. No point to going to those guys. All right, who's ready? Who's ready to go back to Evan Mobley tomorrow? Because I know I am. So Jared Allen out. Darius Garland is questionable. I do expect him to play, but Mitchell, I think, is just okay with Garland, but I don't care what Evan Mobley did to us last game. I just don't care. I still think he looks like one of the better plays in the mid-range at 7.3K with no Jared Allen. His floor per ceiling goes way up. Obviously, a good defender can get defensive stats as well. So I don't care what happened last game. The ownership's going to drop. Good for the Sharks. I absolutely love Mobley once again. Not going to chase Strus. I'll let the absolute worst DFS players in the world play Max Strus, and then it's hard to get to anyone else. Levert's playable off the bench, but yeah. And if Garland plays and he's not on a limit, I think 7K is too cheap for him. I would like some Garland. And then if Garland's out, then that's where things change. Then Donovan Mitchell, I think, becomes one of the better spend-ups on the slate. Evan Mobley would look a little bit better. Karis LeVert would then shoot up to one of the best value plays on the slate. Would really like him. And then it would just be more usage for guys like Strus, etc. So yeah, that news is pretty important. And this game looks phenomenal. This game just looks amazing. So two super fast-paced teams. I think Fred VanVleet really stands out to me at 7.6. I think Sengun really stands out to me at 7K. I absolutely love him. I think Jalen Green is a solid play at 6.3. I think Jabari Smith is a really good play at 5.3. Dylan Brooks, I don't mind. I just hate playing the guy, but he's fine. So I absolutely love this four from the Rockets tomorrow. Love them. Love them. On the Spurs, I think you have some good plays here too. I think Zach Collins is a pretty good play once again at 5.7K against Houston. I like Vassell's ceiling at 6.8K. I like Keldon Johnson's ceiling also at 6.9K. I think they're more priced about right, but I still do like their ceilings. I think Wemby's interesting after getting into massive foul trouble last game, but I think he gets close to 30 minutes. I like his ceiling. Sochan, I really like at 5K playing the point. I still think he's too cheap. I really like him. So there's just a ton to like here in this game. This game just looks great to me. Let's move on to Toronto. Okay spot here for Toronto. Siakam, I think, is priced about right, but I mean, I really like Scotty Barnes at 6.9K. If you watch the preseason, he was being a lot more aggressive out there. Obviously, we know he's a good defender, can get those defensive stats. He can stuff the stat sheet, good rebounder. I really like Scotty Barnes at 6'9". OG's playable. I think Dennis Schroeder is interesting too. He had a really, really big game. He played huge minutes. Jakob Poeltl at 5.3 does seem too cheap as well. So I definitely do have some interest in this game. Chris Boucher, I believe, was the DNP. Achua, you saw have a big game. I think Poeltl got into foul trouble. I forget though. Could be wrong. But yeah, I really like Scotty, and then I have some interest in Schroeder and Poeltl. On to Chicago, so once again, it's a bad spot, but definitely some cheap price tags here. So I think all three of the main three Chicago guys are solid plays. I think if I had to rank them, Levine 1, Vooch 2, DeMar DeRozan 3. And I think Kobe White is a pretty safe value at 4.9. He's going to play decent minutes. He'll have the ball in his hands a decent amount too. And he's not scared to shoot the ball as well. So definitely do have interest in the main four bulls here. I think they're all too cheap, and I think Patrick Williams just fine, just there for me. So let's move on to Brooklyn. So the big news here is Claxton. So Dallas did start a really small lineup. They played Kleba at the 5. They started Derek Jones Jr. and obviously Luka, Kyrie, Grant Williams. So it's going to depend, I think, on what Dallas does with their starting lineup, on who they're going to start here. I am praying to the gods that they start Day'Ron Sharpe. I am absolutely praying. So we'll keep an eye on what the Nets do, but if Day'Ron Sharpe starts, he becomes one of the best value plays on the slate. They could do a number of things. They could throw like DFS in the lineup, Royce in the lineup. We'll take a wait and see approach there, but just know if Day'Ron Sharpe does for some reason start, he would look great. And then, as I said, I don't like Dinwiddie as much with Ben Simmons starting on this team, so I honestly prefer Ben Simmons to Spencer Dinwiddie. I think Ben Simmons is a really solid play at 6K. Bridges is fine. Like I said, I'd prefer Ben Simmons to Dinwiddie. Cam Johnson played decent minutes. I think he's okay to solid at 5'2". And then I'm not going to play Cam Thomas. I'll let the slappies chase that. And then with Claxton out, you're probably going to see more minutes for Royce, etc. So keep an eye on the starting lineup for there. With Brooklyn, it's going to be extremely, extremely important. Sorry, guys. So let's go over Dallas. So Luka, kind of like Jokic, kind of like Giannis. They're always firmly, firmly in play for me. So I think Luka's a good spend up. Not going to pay that price for Kyrie. And then we're going to monitor what they do with the starting lineup. So I don't know what they were doing last game, but if we get the same starting lineup of Kleber, Derek Jones Jr., Luka, Kyrie, I believe Grant started too. Let me just triple check. Pretty sure he did. Yeah, he did. Then I think Maxi Kleber is a solid value. I think Grant Williams is in play. I don't love the price point though. And then I don't like much else here. Josh Green got good minutes off the bench. But if for some reason they Lively played 30 plus minutes, he had a really big game. But I think he's still priced appropriate. So monitor what they do with the starting lineups in this game. I think that's going to be really, really important for that game. Clips. So, up against Utah, good spot here. I think Paul George and Kawhi are both a little bit too cheap, so I like both of them. I think I prefer Kawhi to Paul George, but it's close. I think Westbrook is a really, really safe play at 7-2. Sorry, I'm trying to go pretty quickly through this. It's such a big slate. And then last year, they weren't playing Zubac too many minutes, but he played 30 plus minutes as well. If they're going to continue to give Zubac 30 plus minutes, I think you got to have interest in him at 6-1. I think they're probably going to have to going up against Utah. Utah's a bigger team, right? So I do like Zubac. I think Zubac is really, really sneaky tomorrow. I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him. So if you want one of my tournament guys that I really like for tournaments, let's just say I'll throw Zubac in there. And then who was I talking about earlier? Was it Cade? It might have been Cade. I forget. Might have been Cade or Jamal Murray. Throw those guys in there. I think they're really, really interesting. And then if Robert Covington starts again, I think he's a solid value. He got 22 minutes, if I recall correctly. Good defender, can get defensive stats, can do a little bit of everything. So Rocco would be valuable if he does start. Bones is playable off the bench, but don't think we need to go there on a 12-game slate. On to Utah, so I don't know what that rotation was. I really, really don't. I don't at all. But if they start Clarkson again, I'm really high on Clarkson, assuming he does start again. Markkanen, I think, is priced about right. Kessler is just okay with me. THT got benched. His rotation was really, really bad. Hard for me to go there. Collins, I believe, started. Seems priced about right. And there's just nothing. This Utah team's very, very unappealing up against the Clips. And then Steph Curry is just too cheap in this matchup against Sacramento. This game is going to pop off, in my opinion. So I really like Steph as a spend up. And I like Chris Paul once again. Going to stuff the stat sheet, obviously. He's going to do absolutely everything for this team. He's going to have the ball in his hands a decent amount. Obviously, Steph's going to do everything for this team, but you get the point. He's going to stuff the stat sheet, etc. So I'm pretty high on Chris Paul once again. I think Clay's playable. And then I like Jonathan Kuminga once again for value. He was on pace for, I want to say, close to 30 minutes until he got into massive, massive foul trouble. And I think they want to give him a lot of run this season. Really good point per minute guy as well. So I think Kuminga once again stands out to me as a pretty good value play. And then I think Kevon Looney is very, very safe at 5-4. Wiggins, Clay, they're playable. But I don't usually roster those guys on such a big slate. And then on the other side of this game, I think Fox is a pretty good play at 8-7. Sabonis is playable. I'll let the absolute slappies chase Barnes. I'm not going to play Keegan. Not going to go to Herter's fine. But yeah, main standout to me on Sacramento is definitely Fox. And then in this Magic game, I think, Paolo is okay. I think he's priced about right. I think Franz is priced about right. I think Wannacard Jr. is priced about right. I think Marco Fultz at 5.5K do like quite a bit. He does have a low floor, but the ceiling is tremendous with him. So I do like me some Fultz. Cole Anthony had a big game. I think I just prefer Fultz. And then Suggs, don't love there. Isaac is pretty good point per minute. He'll get some run, like really good point per minute. Um, if you want like a large field tournament dart, and then Portland. So they got absolutely, I think they got absolutely blown out of the water by the Clips. But I like Simon ceiling once again. Scoot, I like as a bounce back candidate. Grant, Aiton, they're just there for me. And then Brogdon had a big game. I think he crushed in garbage time, I want to say. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for the video, guys. Sorry, I just went through pretty quickly. It's hard to go too in depth on these big of slates, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow.